There could be
I don't know
certain,
what
I don't know what it was. Anyway, we continue. There could be certain damage to the inventories. There could be certain damage to the inventory. Certain inventories could be obsolete. And let me tell one thing very clearly. If it is a broken piece, I will know it as an auditor when I am in the physical count. But if it is an obsolete item or it is an item with a very minor chip thereon, I may not be able to, even with the naked eye, I may not be able to tell it. I require a technical person in the team. I always say in the physical verification of the inventory team, you need a technical person. You cannot have any composition of a physical verification team of inventory without having a technical person, because otherwise you will never be able to know what kind of quality of the material is at the end of the day. So it is a very important that I must have somebody with me even when I verify on 15th of May or 30th of May or 31st of May or maybe 15th of June, whenever. There has to be one quality person with me. I raised one issue yesterday or day before yesterday. We all talk of the auditor is supposed to take the inventory. Take the case of the petrol pumps, or take the case of Indian Oil. How many auditors can say that I know how to take the inventory by day? When I say this, and take the case of the cement industry, where the cement silos are there. In how many cases the auditors can say with certainty that this much stock is there? I personally feel we have to be reasonable. We have to accept certain findings of certain composition of the by some by of certain teams which are well composed, which I am also comfortable with for that matter. I think we should, and this 31st March is a big list. The my standard says it should be carried out at least once in a year. That is what the standard says. It is we who have been saying every time that the inventory has to be taken on 31st of March. The standard does not say 31st of March. Let's be clear on this. To me, when people say reporting date, to me in the case of a listed entity, even 30th June is a reporting date. Even 30th September is a reporting date. Even 31st December is a reporting date, and 31st March is also a reporting date. Every day is a reporting date. All in a listed entity, there are 4 reporting dates. Actually, if you ask me, then on each of the reporting dates, I must be carrying out the inventory. I think I have to be satisfied with regard to the system, and then at some point of time during the year, I should be physically present there to really look at the way the physical inventory is being taken. And if I'm satisfied with that particular process and have nothing to really suspect, professional skepticism is all right. But doubting somebody every time, doubting the integrity of a person every time is also no good at the end of the day. That's my answer. So far as your question with regard to video and drone, etc., is concerned, you can carry out either way you like. I don't mind. But how do you identify the quality of the inventory? And how do you really look at how do you ensure the quality of the video to be good, very frankly? And if something is really in the absolutely dark zone where the video even may not work, that also can be one of the possibilities. And how can the drone get into the godowns for that? I think there are limitations of the electronic systems also. There are limitations of the technology also. We must look at, analyze those, you can say the deficiencies of those systems. And then if we still feel satisfied, we feel satisfied. I can only tell you one thing. It's for the auditor to see what kind of risk he is willing. And it is his judgment. And no judgment can override his judgment. Let me be very clear about it. In one of the audit committees where I am the chairman, I held a separate meeting on video with the auditors. And I told them that these are my concerns. They said that we are satisfied. If the auditor says I am satisfied and I am telling him that you please look at this also, I think audit committee chairman will be more than happy. And when we asked them in the audit committee also, they said we are happy with everything. So I am very happy. It is duly recorded that the auditor said. So whose judgment is to matter ultimately? I have asked a question to the auditor, and auditor says I am satisfied with the inventory. I think that's the end of the matter. After all, there are companies which have already finalized, published their financial statements even before the 20th of this month, April, before the 20th April. After all, the auditors must have satisfied themselves, even with regard to going concern in that particular case. Of course, these are going concerns. I am very clear. Those both companies are going concerns. There is absolutely no doubt. But then it is the judgment of the auditor, satisfaction of the auditor. I think at some point of time you must leave it to them. Another thing that you raised is with regard to whether the physical inventory can be carried out by someone else. Suppose I am in Delhi and someone in the unit is in Jaipur. Can I depute a chartered accountant from Jaipur to conduct the physical verification there? I can only say that when I talk of relying upon the work of a management's expert or auditor's expert also, that expert is not a chartered accountant. Let's be clear on that. It has to be other than a chartered accountant. Whereas when I come to the other standard, it talks of a chartered accountant only. If I have to create an extended team, if I will not treat this chartered accountant as another expert, which was made out in one of the webinars, maybe 2 days back or a day back,
Right.
that someone said that it will be another expert. I said, no, it is not another expert, because the other chartered accountant will not be another expert. He has to be a part of my team. I will treat him as a part of my extended team, engagement team. And if I can treat him as a part of my engagement team, where is the problem? And believe me, if the institute can come up with this small clarification, that you can engage the firm of chartered accountants and can treat them as a part of your engagement team, it can create a lot of work for the SMPs in this particular year, only for the physical verification of stocks. It's for the institute to come out with the notification or with some kind of a pronouncement for that matter. And I'm sure that all business houses are willing to pay to those firms, and it can be a good amount. Let me also tell you that it will not be a small amount. It will be a good amount which will be paid to them. The both, and it's a win-win situation for everybody. It's a win-win situation. The chartered accountant firm also gets the money. I also get the comfort that it is my extended arm. Basically, I'm able to conduct the audit according to the pronouncement of the institute, and also the other person is able to earn. I think everything is met as a consequence thereof. Yes, absolutely.
So if I can just, I'm largely in agreement. Just to add to some of the points you said, I'm with you that it need not be on 31st of March. That is why we have this concept of roll forward, roll back procedures. I think just for the members, they should be careful in case they have clients wherein, let's say, there is a perpetual inventory system. It's an easier answer. But let's say if you've got unlisted entities, you never attended a stock count during the year. I think it will be a challenge, and we need to be careful there. So let's say even if I attend the count on in May, right? I think it depends again what was the movement of inventory in the interim. So let's say if the company was in a business wherein there was no inventory movement because it was locked down, etc., it may be still easier. But even when we do the inventory count in May, we should be careful what were the controls that were exercised by the company during this period, because your controls, typical controls would also have become weak. So we'll have to see regarding movement of inventory during the lockdown, how did they take care? Now let's say if your client was in an essential services, they were working, but let's say you couldn't go for the stock count. Now there again, there the controls on movement of inventory would become much more important. For you, the reconciliation may become much more difficult. So while I believe yes, you can do the count later, all that I'm saying is be careful. You have to see what new controls were put in place. Were the earlier controls working? What is your past experience? So let's say my past experience was that typically management's discrepancies in the inventory count every time I attended were nominal. Okay, and my comfort can be more. Let's say if in the past I've always felt that the inventory systems have been very weak. So even if I attend on 15th of May, I may do this. I think there may be a challenge. So leverage your past experience in terms of the testing of controls, the level of discrepancies, what controls were put in place during the lockdown period. These factors or these controls testing would become relevant when you're doing the testing later. And if I can just highlight one more point, sir, which you've typically mentioned in your earlier webinars, is that inventory is one area we need to be careful more, because this is for your DP limits. So you've had instances of maybe incorrect inventory levels reporting earlier, and therefore you may have this tendency for companies to now clean up, etc. I think that bit I'll leave to you to maybe elaborate a bit more. But I think given that inventory does assume importance, especially for unlisted entities where there may not have been a perpetual count, systems may be weak, etc. I think that is where we will need to be more careful. Your alternative evidence together with your subsequent inventory may give you the comfort, but I'm just saying we need to be skeptical there. That was the only point I wanted to make, and I'm totally with you on the fact that if, let's say, even after lockdown, I think if it's lifted, I think the interstate movement will happen much, much, much later, and therefore I think one of a good solution is getting CF firms in the other cities to do it. And one of a few things when even member firms are entering, let's say firms are entering into such contracts with other chartered accountants, 2 or 3 things I think we're also saying it is important to get independence. Okay, that's another thing which, frankly, when we were recently discussing this and we were looking at how do we identify chartered accountant firms who can carry this out, we realized independence also. So I think it's not just about just identifying the right party, but also making sure that they're independent. And I think the point you made is very important. If I look at the auditing standards, my sense is that the person so appointed becomes an extended member of the team. The standard says in that case, the firm which is appointed remains responsible for direction, supervision, and review. These are the 3 terms it uses. So the party which will appoint them will continue to be responsible. I don't think in their report they can say, oh, the inventory count was done by somebody else. So once you appoint them, like you correctly said, the third party is not an expert. It's a chartered accountant, only a skill set which you should have. You use them as an extended team. You can't make a reference, and you direct, supervise, and review. And I think in that case, if you've got these firms which are maybe, let's say, if a firm like you said in Jaipur is helping a firm in Delhi, I think there should be good documentation to demonstrate they took instructions, the instructions were followed, how the reporting. I'm just getting into documentation now to demonstrate this direction, supervision, and review did take place for the other firm also to be able to leverage their work.
I can only tell you, Archana, that this COVID-19 in particular, and I will seek your comment on this, is going to bring in its wake one thing very clearly, and that is extensive documentation by the firms of chartered accountants to satisfy themselves with regard to many, many issues, not one issue, not only going concern and inventory. I think any other issue that we are going to discuss that will involve the huge documentation. And the point that you have raised now is that if the other firm that I pick up from Jaipur or from Indore or from Mumbai or from anywhere, if I sit in Delhi or they pick me up from here, each one of us has to ensure that the other firm is independent. Independent in the sense that they should not have been carrying out any other assignment for that client. The client should not be able to pick up a firm which is already rendering them some service. I think that has to be avoided under all circumstances. Otherwise, that firm will not be independent, and then there can be lot many compromises. I think that will run a great danger of getting into some other kind of problem. So I think so far as inventory is concerned, we can stop here, because I don't think that there can be anything more than what we have discussed on inventory, unless you have something in your mind.
I think that's it.
Then any other issue that now
yeah,
you
maybe
can
we
start.
can move on.
Yes, we can move on to any other issue.
Yeah, maybe we can look at accounts also, sir. I think linked with going concern, I think the issue I wanted to pick up is impairment.
Yeah,
because the same concern.
That I will ask you.
Okay. Okay.
So far you have been questioning me. Now I will set a paper for you. Now let me at least put an exam to you. Tell me, Inma, I think I have been thinking loud, very frankly, that in this present environment, whatever is going to happen, I will give you one example which we discussed the other day in the webinar somewhere else. You were not there in the webinar, but you are definitely one of the participants the other way around. One of the oil director, the annex the director of finance of Oil India came in, and he told us that the crude which is available today, which is lying with IOC or with Oil India, is going to be sold at a rate which is half the rate at which it has been purchased earlier. Now, 31st March, the rate might have been X. But the circumstances, the events subsequent to the date of balance sheet are absolutely clear that these particular items are going to be sold. The oil is going to be sold at half the rate, basically. That's one example that I'm telling you. The other example is that I'm an exporter and I've got orders in hand. I've actually already prepared. I have already manufactured the garments. This could be a case of the lady garments. I've manufactured the lady garments as a consequence of those orders. But my orders are cancelled as on 31st of March or post 31st of March. I will say post 31st of March, COVID-19 impact. How do I value these inventories?
So, sir, actually, inventory, I think in a way linked to inventory only. Now, continuing with that, the NRV of inventory will be a critical matter. Okay. And you're absolutely right on 31st of March, because in India, lockdown started on around actually 22nd, 23rd, it started. So, if I was to take a company which has, let's say, a local base, one may argue that, listen, till 31st March, my market prices were not affected. Market prices dipped only in April or May. So why are you asking me to kind of make any adjustment to NRV? Now the standard acknowledges that if for subsequent movement, it says you see whether the subsequent decline is because of factors arising subsequently, or the decline has happened later but because the conditions were existing. So let's say if it was a pure demand and supply kind of a factor which had led to a decline without any COVID, I would have probably ignored. But in this case, the condition, in most of the situations, like you mentioned, that the decline is happening because of COVID. In the absence of COVID, it may not have happened. So the fact that COVID implications were there, the conditions were existing on 31st of March. The impact, the overall impact is still getting seen. Okay, so it is becoming deeper and deeper, and therefore, because it's related to the conditions which existed, any subsequent decline will have to be factored in, and therefore, if NRV is less than the cost, it will have to be provided for. So unless and until you've got committed non-cancelable contract, but in the example you took, the second example, you said I had contracts, but those contracts have been cancelled. So it's only where you had a non-cancelable contract can I say, okay, I plan to fulfill, I'm holding the inventory on 31st of March. I plan to fulfill this in April. It's a non-cancelable. I can take the pricing which is agreed. But if that is not the case, it's a non-cancelable, or I'm just holding inventory, NRV will have to be written down. And this is frankly what we're seeing actually. So
what happens to Indian oil?
So, but so sir, you will have the
trying to put across is, if Indian oil has to book all these losses, what will be the balance sheet of Indian oil look like as on 31st of March? I don't know.
And so that is why I think maybe I'm moving away from inventory. I'll come back to this because there are two other issues in inventory. Now companies are saying I'm more on the presentation bit. They're saying, can we show this loss as an exceptional? Now I don't. I mean, if I look at NRV etc., when you look at the standard, it is acknowledged as an exceptional item etc. If you look at para 97, 98 of India's one. But the only thing I wanted to make, the point I wanted to make here is, typically we will expect the cost to be incremental. So in case of NRV, this is clearly incremental. While it's just a presentation issue, but I think from a larger perspective of looking at the performance of the company, this will definitely have a big impact. Whether I show this as exceptional, not show this as exceptional, I think from a performance perspective, it will have a huge adverse impact. And not just this, actually.
Very frankly, whereas I tend to go with you, but I have one concern. And that is that in the entire profit and loss account today, you will have only exceptional items. So what needs to be done is, let the company give it full disclosure. Because what you are trying to do is that you want to make the reader of the financial statements read the financial statements of the current period compared to the earlier period, saying very clearly why this has happened. So you cannot go by each item, basically treating each item as an exceptional item. No, I think the best way will be to give a detailed note saying that this was our revenue. As on 31st of March, the revenue will not go down. Let's be very clear about it. These will be the other items which will be impacted. The provisions may be there. The provisions could take place because of the losses which you are likely to incur. Even the onerous contracts may be there, as you might be explaining little later. Whatever losses you are going to incur as a consequence thereof, the full disclosure be given in one paragraph rather than showing every item as an exceptional item. That's the point I'm trying to make. It will
And
make
sir,
more
I
sense.
feel these are presentation, and I feel these are presentation matters. Presentation doesn't take away the real performance. I think the true test is how is the company performing. Whether you show it above, below, those are just dressing matters. I think the real test is my profit has taken a hit. The point that you were trying to make. Imagine what would happen to a company like that. And sir, if I can just maybe make a point similar to that. At times, companies are saying, "Listen, our NRV has gone down," and someone may argue in the context of oil, it has gone down for factors other than COVID. Okay. Now, I think it will be very difficult because there is so much of intertwining of factors to say, oh, did the decrease take place because of COVID or for factors other than COVID? We've seen this also happening. They're saying, no, 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 this is for other reasons. This is not because of COVID. How would you really make that out? I think there's so much of interplay. I would actually take the decline to be somewhat linked, unless, based is my limited knowledge, it will be very difficult to say the decline in oil prices is not impacted by COVID at all. And therefore, the impact comes in, and you're right. The larger issue is the performance of the company rather than how I disclose. And so with regard to inventory, just a related bit, if I may mention, is that because of orders going down, etc., like you just said, orders getting cancelled, I may have idle capacity. Or maybe again, I'm going back to the initial comment, the issue may be lesser in March. March, maybe it was just 10 days, and maybe more in the next quarter. But if you've got idle capacity, please be careful in terms of your overhead allocation, the fixed overheads. Your fixed overheads is based on normal production. Now, so don't start calculating your normal production all over again. Your normal production is what it was. It will not get revised.
Yes.
Now you may have a situation that because if your production is less, the total fixed overheads which will get absorbed by inventory will be less, and therefore you may have now fixed overheads to some extent getting recognized as an expense. So that will also be a hit or a loss that the companies may have to bear because of now the decline in the order.
It is bound to happen because the accounting standard itself prescribes that.
Yeah.
If you look at AS2 or Ind AS 2, there is a very specific paragraph with regard thereto, that if suppose your production goes down drastically and it is abnormal, in that case the fixed overheads will have to be absorbed on the normal production. You can't say that I will absorb it from the production which is abnormally low, because in that case the inventory value will go too high and it will become more than the net realizable value basically. So I think that para is very well captured already in the accounting standard for that matter. So the point that you have raised is absolutely justified, and it's going to happen in COVID-19 because the companies have been closed. There's no doubt about it. The production has been closed. You take the case of Maruti, you take the case of other companies. Now, if they want to allocate the overheads of this particular month somewhere else, I think that will be absolutely ridiculous. It cannot be done under any circumstances. The fixed overheads, for that matter. So I think the point that you have raised is very well taken. The other side of it is you look at the case of the borrowing cost for that matter. Whatever borrowing cost on the various projects that you will incur for this particular period when everything has come to a standstill, which is a normal period, those borrowing costs cannot be capitalized. If these are the even under AS 16 for that particular matter, because that standard also itself very clearly says whenever the interruptions are abnormal, in that particular case, whatever borrowing costs you incur, these have to be charged off to profit and loss account, and these cannot be capitalized because these don't add any value to the project in those circumstances. So I think this COVID-19 is going to hit the entire company, the entire industry in different accounting standards. It's not one accounting standard, or it's not one auditing standard. Because even the costing formula, if you really ask me, whenever I used to study costing, now one has not studied ever after the chartered accountancy qualified after 75 for that matter. But the fact of the matter remains, the costing says very clearly, whatever is abnormal has to be charged off to profit and loss. Whatever is abnormal has to be charged off to profit and loss.
And so what is happening is because you use the word abnormal, it struck me. At times, in times like this, actually companies may incur some additional expense. So let's say your storage cost is more than what you actually thought, or maybe to remove your item, let's say from maybe the port, you've got to incur, additional testing is required. So you may actually incur new cost or additional cost which you were not incurring earlier. And I think they will actually have to be seen. They may actually become like abnormal cost, and you may not be able to inventarize them. So I think the point that you referred on the abnormal cost is very relevant. Linked to the inventory, so then you mentioned onerous. Should we touch upon that? I think that's again from an onerous.
That has been one of your favorite subjects.
So I think because we had for years and years, frankly, every time we went through so many agreements, we always saw this force majeure clause, but it was never really used. Okay, it's the first time I've seen the force majeure clause come into focus like anything. So the point I wanted to just highlight here is that you will have situation where company is not able to fulfill its contracts, right? So it could be that let's say I was supposed to make a sale and I'm no longer able to, and because of the contract, I'm liable to pay penalties. The other thing can be that while the contract is being executed, my revenue has gone down. Like we discussed, the prices are being renegotiated, so prices have gone down, and therefore the contract has become loss making. But I've decided, okay, let me continue rather than have inventory kind of piling up. Let me at least dispose of, even if it's at a loss. The other could be, no, my selling price hasn't changed, but my costs have increased, like I was discussing. So there could be various reasons why you could be now into loss situations as far as your sale contracts are concerned. So either the sale contract becoming a loss making, or you becoming liable to pay penalties because of either a delay or failure to perform totally as far as your obligation is concerned. Now, should I be providing for these penalties? Should I be recognizing a provision for these loss-making contracts? So if I take penalties, actually the concept is the same, but let me just take simpler bit first, penalties. If a penalty is triggered, if it's very clear that I have failed to perform my obligation and I will be liable to pay penalty, typically I have to recognize a provision. But if I can demonstrate that as per the agreement, there is a force majeure clause, and that clause will cover COVID, okay, then actually I can say I'm no longer liable to pay penalty and not make a provision. Now, therefore, the interpretation of force majeure clause will become very important. One is how it is being interpreted from a legal perspective in the jurisdiction, let's say India, and similarly, how is at times it can be drafted in a way which is very contract specific between the two parties. So you'll have to see, I mean, no force majeure clause will be including COVID because nobody expected this. So you'll have to read the clause very carefully. Does it cover pandemic like this? What are the preconditions for something to be called a force majeure? And if force majeure is met, then provision need not be recognized. So this can be very relevant for companies. Similarly, when I'm making my provision for onerous contracts, in onerous contracts, in very simple terms, I see that is my contract loss making. And there, the standard says, you see, if you exit the contract today, what is the penalty you pay? Or if you were to fulfill the contract, what is the loss you will make? Provide the lower of the two. So again, here, if I can demonstrate that the force majeure clause covers COVID, I may be able to say penalty is zero, and therefore lower of the two is zero and nothing to be provided. So given the fact that a large number, the way the pricing is being renegotiated, we've seen a large number of contracts being renegotiated and pricing being decreased. We do expect a large number of onerous contracts or at least penalty clauses to get triggered. So please look at the force majeure clause to see whether any provision is required or not. And it can go very extreme. Like I said, you may be able to avoid recognizing a provision totally if it is very clearly covered in force majeure. So do you want to add anything on this?
No, I will only like to say that this force majeure clause, post-COVID-19, actually, the one profession which is going to grow in leaps and bounds is the legal profession. Every contract is going to be litigated. That you can be absolutely sure about. Because the losses are going to be so huge on account of these clauses. Because if I have to pay rent and I say that no, it is a force majeure clause, I have already said that if it is an act of God, it's a natural calamity, it is something of that sort. In that case, I'm not supposed to pay you the rent for that particular period. No, the other side is going to say this is not an act of God. This is not an act of God. This is something man-created virus, basically. If you ask me, that is what is being said, and that is what is being argued, and that will be argued in the courts of law. And this probably virus has been created in a lab, so it cannot be considered to be an act of the God, and it cannot be considered to be a natural calamity. You may consider it to be a disaster from that angle. But can you say that it's a natural calamity? It is nothing like a flood. It's not an earthquake. It's not a fire, for that matter. So, to my mind, the one profession which is going to gain because of this force majeure is your legal uh, profession. And I don't know that how many cases will be filed in the times to come. But one thing is very clear. I may still be able to argue on the penalty side that, okay, we'll look at penalties may be waived. Penalties are generally waived in the various circumstances. But so far as the other aspect is concerned, if a contract has actually become onerous on account of renegotiation, I have absolutely no choice but to provide for it as on 31st of March. Even if it is a post 31st March event for that matter. And I am very sure it will not be a single contract. Probably every company may be faced with this kind of a situation on one front or the other. This is what is bound to happen. Whether it is a real estate company or this is pharmaceutical company, this is exporter. I think each one of us is going to be faced with these kind of problems. The other person will say that if you want to supply me, I'm willing to take it at this particular rate, otherwise I'm not willing to take it at all. So even the compromises for the force majeure, I can tell you that. Take the cases where you have the realty buildings who have actually let out the premises, the force majeure clause is there. Ultimately, realty will say, okay, yeah, you pay me lease rent of, say, half the lease rent or 30% of the lease rent or 20% of the lease rent for this particular period. So all those losses will have to be booked. We have absolutely no choice on that particular ground. Because people will like to buy peace of mind also after they are also aware that if they get into litigation, it may take years together to get it sorted out. And I have always said that SMPs should wait for the audit beyond June. After all, we conduct the tax audits also beyond June. Rather, we conduct the tax audits in September. So why can't we wait for the company's audit till 30th of June or beyond that? By that time, the conditions will be far more clearer for you to estimate. Your estimation will be much better, even from the purpose of really determining the impairment of the asset. If your business is again picking up, the going concern concept will be more clear, impairment of assets will be more clear, the onerous contracts will be far more clear. So please wait for the audits. Particularly I'm advising SMPs because I am advising SMPs because they are used to conduct the audit a little late. So please don't hurry to conduct the audits. Wait for the conditions to get clear. Yes, one thing I will say, if you can conduct the physical verification of the inventories in the meantime, get it done wherever you can. But so far as the final audit is concerned, please wait for that.
So I think so you made a very good point. And actually, while we are discussing some aspects of where the accounting implication can be, effectively wherever there is an estimate, you will have to remake your estimate. So, pick up any standard, like you mentioned, so it's not about one standard, it's about wherever there is an estimate, all your earlier estimates made may no longer be valid. and therefore all of them will require a review. And I totally agree. Right now, it's difficult for anyone sitting inside their home to say this is what the outlook is going to be. Nobody has any real idea. So I think the longer the time which is available to make estimates, the better inputs we will have, and a better or a more reasonable estimate will that be. So I totally agree. And because it's not about one item of force majeure or inventory, it is pervasive. I think wherever you have an estimate, therefore it will help. Yeah, I think on onerous, I don't think I have anything more, sir. But you took the example of rent. So I'm just taking cue from there and stepping into that. You're absolutely right. The point you made, I have seen lessees using the force majeure clause to push for rent concession. So they are saying, while it's a legal debate, they are saying, I will not pay you. They are saying 2 months, if for 2 months I can't occupy the property, I will not pay you. And they're saying, even if let's say lockdown get lifted with the social distancing requirement where utilization will be 25%, let's say if there is sitting area of 100, but because of government regulations, I can only get 25 come in today. They're saying, therefore, we will not pay. So lessees are using this. And while what is effectively the outcome is interest, they may avoid this force majeure, but then the outcome is a rent concession. So they are saying, okay, either the lessor is saying we will waive off 1 month rent, or we will give you a decrease. We've seen, decreases till December 2020 being agreed, and this has become such a big issue. Frankly, sir, I thought just like any other accounting implication, this is one of them. Okay, because if you have a rent concession, it will require you to see whether it's a variable consideration or a modification of contract, and accounting will have to come in. So most of the companies as lessees do have some property leases or some kind of an equipment lease. For lessors, it's much more. So imagine for each contract working this out. But surprisingly, this has become such an issue even globally that IASB is now coming out with a practical expedient, because they're saying accounting for this rent concession on a contract by contract will be too much of an effort. Will it be worth the cost versus benefit analysis? And that is another thing we're seeing. So rent concession, frankly, while for March, I don't think it's an issue. The rent concession discussion has happened only for April, and the concessions are being given from April onwards. So March, not a big thing, but from April onwards, rent concession will be something which is again an area where there can be a significant impact. I think, so maybe before I get into one or two accounting issues, maybe something which has a linkage with audit.
I'm raising an issue to you with regard to revenue recognition. How do you feel that this variable consideration, particularly under Ind AS 115, is going to be impacted so far as this COVID-19 is concerned? Because you see, the uncertainty with regard to the quantities to be sold by the other party over a particular period of time, and to avail those discounts or incentives is going to be far more uncertain. Otherwise, earlier what used to happen, that I am selling into the month of January, telling him if you achieve by March this particular thing, I will give you this much of incentive, and I will be providing that. No, this is going to be one of the important issues, that wherever I have affected sales in the month of March, or maybe in the month of February, and where the conditions are attached up, say, till the June or some other particular part. Earlier, I could have assessed that they have been selling it all this particular period, they will be able to achieve it also in the subsequent period. But no, how it is going to happen? That's the point I'm trying to raise to you.
So again, very interesting, sir. And maybe in all the previous discussions that we've had, I think we focused on 115, but while you were just raising the question, and you mentioned we have SMPs as well, I think maybe, and I'm just thinking out aloud, I've not thought about it earlier, but I'd also like to think about it from a maybe on Ind AS 18 perspective, because the two standards are different quite a bit. But if I can just first mention a bit about Ind AS 115, I think now what has happened is any adjustment, any benefit that the seller gives to the customer, the rebuttable presumption is that it's a reduction from revenue. Okay, and I'm saying rebuttable because in certain cases you may be able to demonstrate, but my default position will be anything which goes to the customer is a reduction. So now with COVID, because prices are being reduced, discounts are being offered which were not earlier the case. All these will affect your transaction price under the standard, and therefore it may lead to reduction in revenue. The even under 115, when I make the sale, like you took the example, I have quantity discounts. I say if you pick up 100 units, I'll give you so much discount. If you pick up 500, so much. Now my estimate of the discounts that will be offered will also undergo a change, so I will have to update all of them. So variable consideration under Ind AS 5 will include penalties, it will include discounts, it will include something which is really, really contingent. So let's say if I had said, if you complete it, I had given a contract for equipment manufacturing, and I had said if you will complete it in 90 days, revenues, I will pay you so much. If you take 110 days, I will pay you lesser. Okay? So now the revenue, because like I said, there may be delays in execution of the contracts. So even where there is genuine variability in the pricing itself, that will come in. Your discounts, your penalties, etc., all of them will require a review of the variable consideration. Now let me come to Ind AS 18. There is some bit of difference, like Ind AS 115 is very clear on how to deal with discounts and variable consideration. Ind AS 18, sir, is not so clear. Now, what used to happen in Ind AS 18, there was diversity in practice. I'm not saying what is right or wrong. A lot of companies used to take the position that if I'm not able to, if there is uncertainty, some will build in the uncertainty in measurement of revenue. Some companies used to postpone revenue recognition, saying it is uncertain, right? So I think, frankly, at a personal level, I believe if you can build in the uncertainty in the measurement, I need not totally postpone revenue recognition. So to the extent the uncertainty in selling prices because of discounts, penalties, rebates that you will give, or the ability of the customers to meet the quantities, discounts, etc. is coming, similar adjustment will need to be made even under Ind AS 18. But like I said, some companies used to take a very extreme view of just deferring. I'm not really sure I like to go there, but something similar to Ind AS 1115 can be followed. You build that in, but that would require you to remeasure the transaction price. And yeah, so I think penalties and discounts, etc., is largely what will lead to it.
Yeah.
If
So
okay, otherwise,
you wanted to ask something.
yeah. Okay, I was moving actually away from revenue. When we were talking about impairment, I was moving on to, the related issues when it comes to impairment of non-financial assets as well as fair value. So from a fair value perspective, and, one interesting thing that we've seen recently, but a lot of things at times you need a valuation report. It could be for an investment, it could be for a PPE, etc. Recently, we started seeing the valuers also in their report putting in some kind of a paragraph to say, because, relating to COVID uncertainty. So effectively, if I as an auditor was relying on a valuer's report, while let's say if I look at the assumptions, etc., look at the competence of the valuer, all okay. But the valuer is also putting in a comment like this, that ultimately this is subject to uncertainty. How should we as auditors deal with it? I mean, would it get carried forward to my reporting? Does it stop me from relying on?
I'm very clear, Archana, on this. If the valuer on whose work I am actually playing the reliance is also putting some kind of a disclaimer, I am using that particular word, disclaimer.
Yeah, so
disclaimer kind of a situation, or is factoring into some, is referring to some uncertainty. I will make it a matter of emphasis. I am very clear on that. I will not leave it. I may not make it a can, but I will definitely take it to emphasis of matter. Because if he cannot say something, because what is the emphasis of matter? That you have some figures in the financial statements which you are just not very certain about, very frankly, but you feel that okay, right now absolutely everything is okay, but you want to bring it. So take the case of a legal case. If you feel that a particular case is material enough, and of course the legal opinion is in your favor right now, but you definitely bring it as a matter of bring it in the emphasis of matter. So I will do the same thing so far as this particular part is concerned. I will talk about the evaluation by an outside expert and refer to his remark basically and the possible outcome thereof. I will do that.
Okay, because this we've started seeing recently. So there was this thing. One is when you're disclosing the uncertainties, assumptions, or judgments in the financial statements, should you just include it there, or do you carry that forward to your report? And I'm with you to some point, but I will also see probably to see how significant is this item, which is for which I'm using the valuation report from an
No,
overall perspective.
if it is too significant, then it can be CAM also.
Yeah, I'm saying I'll bring it into audit report if it is
You see,
significant. Otherwise, I make
my only point is, if I have accepted his valuation, then either it has to be in CAM or it has to be in emphasis of matter. If it is too high a probability, if it is too high and it is too material, in that case I may bring it to CAM. But if it is of a normal significance, I can take it to the emphasis of matter. I don't mind doing that.
the
That's the
other
way I
bit,
look
sir,
at it. If you have any other opinion, you please come out with that.
which is I think I'm all that I was trying to say is that if that item, let's say I may have used a value, but that item as a from a balance sheet percentage perspective, not very material, maybe a disclosure in the financial statements. But if it is a material, and I'm talking about only material,
No,
I will so some kind of an EUM would be required. So it seems like that,
no.
but I wanted to just caution everyone. Frankly, we did not expect this, but this is something we've seen recently. So if
So
you're
it's
taking
bound to
valuation,
happen. You can be rest assured it is bound to happen. Valuers and even certain legal opinions that you may take, they may also come with some kind of disclaimers. You can be sure about it in this COVID-19 because nobody is sure as to what is going to happen. After all, if you are asking a valuer to value one of the non-financial assets, today he can't say as to what is going to happen after a year or so. After all, he's trying to put his fair value today. And when, in any case, if I look at my India's 113, it talks of Habu, very frankly, and you have to really factor in the other person's perception of the property, not my expectation to what use it is to be put to. So I think all these are assumptions and presumptions, and under COVID-19, all these assumptions and presumptions are going to undergo a change. Probably the need for the residential houses may increase, but the need for the luxurious houses may go down. That's the way I look at it. And also the need for commercial flats, etc., to be hired might go down. So I think the valuers are also trying to factor in that. That's the thing which is happening.
yeah, I just wanted to tell them at times it happens that we just look at the valuation, look at the report very carefully. You may have these disclaimers. And so, sorry, I'm digressing again a bit and I'll come back to fair value and impairment. But similar to this, the question which is being raised is that if valuers are adding a general disclaimer, like you said, or if I call it an EM, shouldn't auditors also be, forget in relation to this value, forget, let's say I don't have a valuer, I've not used a valuer, but just like most of the professionals have started adding this, should we as auditors also have a general EOM in our report to say, okay,
I,
while you've done
I
the
don't think
work,
you can. I don't think you can put a disclaimer to true and fair. No
yeah.
way.
So I'm with you. But I'm telling you, sir, this is being very much
Because
debated.
you see what you are auditing, what the expression that you are the opinion that you are giving is with regard to an overall situation. It is not with regard to a specific item. What you are asking a valuer to value is a specific item. Here you are looking at the business, you are looking at the going concern, you are looking at the plant and machinery, you are looking at the buildings, you are looking at the inventory, you are looking, and if you are giving a disclaimer, it means you are giving a disclaimer with regard to every item for that matter. I don't think we will be able to
So
do
for
that.
example, yeah, some of the discussions that have happened, they are saying no, we will have a general EOM irrespective. My personal take, sir, is that in most of the cases, like we discussed, I do expect some kind of a going concern reporting to come. Let's say there is no going concern issue, then we do expect no company will be so insulated that they will have no impact of COVID. So if you're a listed company, we expect some camp relating to COVID, let's say impairment,
Put
ECA,
it in the camp. Put it in
yeah.
the camp. Who
And there
stops you?
yeah. So what we are saying is, one of the ways is, so or let's say if it's an unlisted entity, they will have similar matters like impairment, etc., where there may be an EOM. What we are saying is any uncertainty which that entity is exposed to, where you can explain it when you're talking about your EOMs or CAM. Anyway, when I look at my audit report, my audit report, when I go to the auditor's responsibility, especially on going concern, it very clearly says that there are limitations. This is not on future viability, etc. There are uncertainties. These may undergo a change. So I think from an auditor responsibility, the fact that there are inherent limitations is already brought out. If you've got this, I would actually see, can I link these uncertainties to my going concern or any other COVID related reporting in EOM or CAM, whatever it is. It would be in a very, I think in a very limited situation wherein there is nothing on COVID. There's no material uncertainty, no EOM, no CAM. Then I may still evaluate, but I would be surprised. I think most of the companies will have something or the other. So that was one bit, but let me come back,
No, but
sir,
you
to
no, but you have raised a very pertinent issue, and I seek an answer from you only.
okay.
You see, in the case of a listed entity, you have a CAM. 601 is applicable, 701 is applicable only to the listed entity. There is no CAM in the case of unlisted entity today. Where do they cover it? Then they cover it
EOM,
in the emphasis matter, EOM.
EOM,
So that we have to make clear to them, because we are talking only of CAM. CAM is only in respect of the listed entities. So we must tell the SMPs that they should try to cover some of the matters where they are feeling really concerned over the realization, etc., or the uncertainties that they feel about. They must take it to the EOM under all circumstances.
So, sir, that's what I mentioned earlier. The items which are typically CAM for a listed may be, I'm not saying necessarily, they may be UM for an unlisted. So typically ECL, impairment, let's say inventory, if you had to do for whatever reason, let's say if it's very significant, you had to rely on significant audit procedures, or let's say external confirmations weren't coming, you had to use some other audit procedures, etc. There could be various matters. See if any EUM is required. And if I can just reiterate it, do not use EUM as just kind of a, as a safety net. EUM is given when something is fundamental to the understanding of the financial statements. And given COVID, I think there will be some sensitivity on some financial statement item or the other. There will be huge sensitivity to the COVID related uncertainties, and that is what we should try and include. Uh, okay, actually, I have two things in my mind. I have revenue as well as fair value, but let me come back to fair value again. So, relating to fair value, sir, the challenges which are in fair valuation are also get linked to impairment of PPE, etc. Now, earlier, a lot of companies used to say, listen, there is no trigger. Okay, my business is continuing as usual. If there is no decline, etc., they could easily argue there is no trigger for impairment, and I will not do an impairment analysis. But I think now, to again, just like going concern, I would take it as a rebuttable presumption that there is a trigger for impairment, and I would now expect all the companies to invariably do a impairment analysis, and I mean a formal impairment assessment wherein they have to look at the cash flows, etc. And again, these cash flows should represent the latest estimates and so on. And the issue which typically comes here, and it's a very genuine issue, is that the uncertainty is so huge. It's very difficult to know what the future outlook is going to be. How do I test as an auditor? Management gives me some projections. How do I test these for impairment? What is the best estimate? Should I say next 3 months? Okay, maybe 10% of the normal business. Then in the next 3 months, it's 50%. How does anybody get any comfort on the impairment assessment?
Let me say one thing. I personally feel the question that you have raised is today going to be the most fundamental under the COVID-19. After going concern and inventory, I
The
personally
link.
feel this question is going to be more important, the impairment. Now, the point that one needs to understand is one needs to have an understanding of the business of the client. And as I told you at the time of going concern, also very frankly, when I was addressing, I told that probably we need to go through the Google, Baba, and we need to read many articles with regard to the business, the nature of the business of our client. If the business that our client is into is going down as per every article in the Economic Times or everywhere else, basically worldwide, my client can't say that I'm growing at 100% or I'm growing rather in this particular time. How a client can grow when the entire industry is going down? There is no way that it is likely to happen. So I'm very clear that we have to start looking at the external information, the sources, the secondary information. First is that the client will provide me the information. The client can even show me the orders for that matter. But those orders may be of little value, because if I look at the orders of that particular client, and if I Google that particular client itself, basically, the Google may be saying that that company is sinking now. It is also possible. I can tell you, I have the cases like that also. No, one is very clear that one cannot only be, we will have to exercise our professional skepticism far more than what we have been doing it in the earlier. That's one thing that I want to make very clear when it comes to the impairment of the assets. Earlier, I may accept the projections given by the management, the assumptions and presumptions, maybe with the 10% of the discount on that, 20% discount on that. Now I may look at it with 50% or 70% discount on that. That's the way I want to express myself. I am going to get into the depth of those assumption presumptions. And if I find anything contrary thereto, I'm going to challenge it. Even the interest rates I'm going to challenge, for that matter, for the purpose of discounting and calculating the present value of the cash flows. So it is not going to be easy. Let me be very clear. The businessman is going to say, the client is going to say, no, my assumption is correct. And when you bring in forth the articles from the other side of it, he will say, no, these are not applicable to me. These are applicable. But believe me, if I today sit on the boards of two of the auto companies, if the auto companies are going down, I can tell you, if the auto industry has gone down, they have also gone down. Not only that, I sit on two of the boards basically. If the auto industry has actually gone down, both have been impacted. One may be more significantly and one may be little compared to that, little bit lesser. That's all. But saying that I will not be impacted, it's not good. If today Hero Honda, I'm using one word, Hero Honda is saying that I will pay only 25%. This is in the public domain, so I can use this particular sentence. I'll pay 25% of the amount due. How can my client say that I will be able to recover 50% or 70% or 80%? My realization will be more than that. Even in the next 6 months, the situation is not going to improve. There is no way that it is going to improve. Firstly, now you will create inventories, and inventories will have to be loaded, and you don't know when the movement of these inventories will start, even for that matter. Because so far, it is very difficult to predict even when the transportation will be allowed. So all those things are going to be triggered. So I personally feel the members have to be very clear. It is no more a normal situation. And believe me, the disciplinary cases post COVID-19, because of COVID-19, will be far more than what these have been in the past. Because if we pass off some of the financial statements the way these have been passed off in the past, today the government, it knows very well, the banker knows very well that the businesses are going to suffer. And if I am trying to show a rosy picture, I think I am going to suffer as a professional. You can be rest assured about it. So my humble submission to all the professionals is, please show as much of professional skepticism as you can. Don't really fall prey to something that the client is saying and I will accept. Let actuary say me something with regard to some of the matters. I'm going to challenge him right forth. So I'm not going to leave it at that particular point of time. So what one is saying, whatever information is given by the client, टेस्ट रेट, अब मैं तो हमेशा ये बोलता हूँ कि भाई अगर पिछले 2 साल से आपका बिजनेस 50% डाउन था या 25% डाउन था, अगले साल में आपका 75% बढ़ेगा कैसे, ये तो बताओ दो मुझे। मैं तो कहता हूँ 100% नहीं बढ़ेगा, पर पिछले साल में अगर 25% डाउन था तो कोविड-19 के बाद आपका क्या, फार्मास्यूटिकल इंडस्ट्री का बढ़ सकता। लेट मी बी वेरी क्लियर अबाउट इट। फार्मास्यूटिकल इंडस्ट्री कैन से दैट आवर बिजनेस विल इंप्रूव, बट द अदर्स कांट से दैट देयर बिजनेस विल इंप्रूव। So that's the point I'm trying to make.
I think very, 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 very relevant points. I think the fact that the last point that you mentioned, I've seen there to be a tendency to say, do I know better than the management? They know how much it will go, they understand the sector better. But I think we have to exercise skepticism here. I think 2 or 3 points I'm just adding to that, what you mentioned, is that first, it will impairment analysis, sir, is somewhat linked to going concern, because in both you'll see the future cash flows. So I think somewhere when you're making your assessment of going concern impairment, just see how the two, the assumptions are similar and consistent. The other is the point that you made. Sorry, sir.
Just stopping it here 1 minute. I think also refer to 720 to them. What the management feels in 720 itself. What kind of report they are generating under SA 720, and what will be my responsibility there too.
So I will also quote your example. So absolutely right. So when you're looking at assumptions or the approach that the management is taking, see what the management is holding out publicly. So you look at the annual report, what are some of the assumptions? And I recollect, sir, the example that you've shared, that while in one case, the company had not done any impairment, they said, from a cash flow estimate, they're taken very positive, but the annual report started with, if I recollect, sir, the future outlook is very gloomy. So I think it is not just about quantitative, qualitatively see what is the information which is coming out from the annual report. Is it consistent with what the management is holding out to you? It's very natural for the management to give you the best case scenario, but the current situation is such that, frankly, two things I will say. One, which sir mentioned, I will try and use external information to the extent possible, right? The second is I will use multiple scenarios. That's the only way to mitigate the sensitivity risk. So don't try and say there is only one scenario, X percentage growth, or X percentage of business in the next 3 months, and then so and so. Take multiple scenarios, do probability weighted average approach. In fact, and it's not going to be easy. I mean, I'm totally sympathetic. Doing this estimate of future cash flows is going to be one of the toughest jobs. We did have, I had the opportunity to interact with some of the sector experts, when they were sharing the impact of COVID on sector. And to each, on different instances, in different sectors, when I asked those sector experts, can you tell me what is the range I can take? Even the sector experts are actually at a loss. I'm being very frank. And therefore, I believe somewhere we will need to see what is the outlook relating to the industry which is available in public domain. What is the overall economic outlook? Take some reasonable, let's say if I was to say, maybe like the beginning example you took for a hospitality or for maybe a cruise company or an airline, clearly 6 months revenue, I will say zero. Okay, but what after that? Do I expect 30%, 50%? You may want to say, okay, there can be 3-4 scenarios, assign probability to it, and then do it. And the last bit, sir, that you mentioned on the discount rate. So if you are using the multiple cash flow analysis, then as per the standard, the uncertainties get into the are factored in the cash flows, and then your interest rate is basically the interest free plus the risk premium. And again, there one of the questions which is coming up is that since risk-free interest rate or the government bond rates is going down, does it mean my discount rate will go down? And therefore my cash flows become more and more, Not necessarily. We also expect the entity-specific risk premium to increase, and therefore be very careful. Companies can actually play, a half a percentage here, there at times can have a significant impact. So be very careful in terms of the discount rate. Use external information. Use multiple scenarios to the extent possible and do a probability weighted average. That's what I would like to say on impairment. So there's one more bit, but
I'm asking you one question. That's on ECL.
On ECL,
I just want to know one thing from you with regard to ECL, because that's going to be a major challenge again, very frankly. See, in the normal circumstances, my credit period was 90 days, say. And the 3 buckets which I had made out, basically, where there is no significant risk, where there could be some risk indication, and then where there is significant risk and which leads to impairment. Now, because of COVID-19, my normal credit period gets extended to 180 days from 90 days. How do I deal with this situation?
So I think very interesting. So if I can, sir, link it also first from maybe not from a banking, I do not know how many are, but if I was just to I'll take 2 examples. What practice we've seen, and it seems reasonable to me. Let's say where banks have now given a 3 months moratorium, right? Now one may argue that now it is as per as per the legal requirements, my due date has extended. But does it mean that, the three buckets, can I say if I was initially in the 12 months ECL, do I believe that there is a significant increase in credit risk? And frankly, a large number are moving into that. While it will be a case to case, even though the extension, the 3 months extension has been given because of the government, this thing, it is being because of the other impact on businesses. There will be significant linkages, and you can't presume that I'm still in the 12 months ECL scenario. I may actually move to a significant increase in credit risk and now do a lifetime ECL, and we've seen that happening. So I think that would be important. The other, you want to comment on this, sir? Otherwise, I'll take one more.
I will like to say, I will like to even examine my customer, very frankly, customer base. If my customer base is such where the COVID-19 impact could not be significant, if I'm actually supplying to pharmaceutical industry, in that case, even under COVID-19, my credit period goes up slightly. It may not result into a significant risk, which may lead to impairment. That's the point I'm trying to make. I think
so. Maybe I'll expand on
the composition of the debtors base also.
I get your point. I'll expand on that, sir. So maybe I thought maybe your indication was towards that extension, but absolutely right. When now I'm doing my ECL, because COVID will impact, while it will impact just about all companies, the impact will differ from sector to sector. It will also differ from geography to geography. So depending upon where my customers are, which sector, which geography, the impact can differ. So earlier I may not have considered industry and location as a criteria for segmenting my customers for the purpose of ECL. Now, when I make those buckets and, when I segment my customers and make those buckets, I should try and make a distinction of my customers based on location and industry, and then look at it. So I think fair point. Maybe I didn't get that you were trying to indicate towards that. The other bit, if I can. So the other is on, yeah. The other bit, so if I can just link it also to credit period. The fact that what is happening is it's not just about loans, etc. Or it is also that now credit periods are being renegotiated. So let's say I had initially given to my customer, a credit period of 6 months. Now I am giving additional credit period wherein let's say it becomes overall 14, total credit period going to 14 months. The question is, do I need to remeasure my revenue? Okay, and this may be more relevant under Ind AS 115 because in Ind AS 18, let me come to Ind AS 18 also maybe. But in Ind AS 115 now, if I'm moving from let's say 6 months to 14 months, under Ind AS 115 I will not change my revenue. But I think what I wanted to highlight, and maybe sir I missed it in one of the earlier sessions, was that I will have to, my debtor, once I recognize a receivable, I then move into Ind AS 109. Now, under Ind AS 109, I will have to see, does this represent a significant modification? If it does, I will have to remeasure. So let me take a very simple example. Let's say my revenue was 100. There was a 6 month financing period, but I never separated interest. I took entire 100 as revenue for sale of goods. Now today, when my credit period is moving from 6 months to 14, and I can no longer ignore the financing, I have to calculate the financing. What should I do? Now under 115, because I had agreed the transaction price earlier, that is how my commercial agreement had happened. 115 says any subsequent changes, please ignore. They are for your new contracts. For the existing contract, continue to recognize revenue as you agreed it, which means I will continue to recognize revenue of 100, presuming it is recoverable. But fact remains, my credit period has changed from 6 months to 14. There is a significant financing component. I will do an analysis under Ind AS 109. If I conclude there is a significant modification, it means I have to remeasure my receivable. The funny bit is my revenue will not change. My receivable, when I remeasure my receivable, I will land up recognizing interest income as a seller together with the corresponding fair value or gain or loss due to modification of receivable. So I think be very careful, just because Ind AS 115 may not lead to a change in transaction price, there may still be an impact under Ind AS 109 because of this modification, especially if it is considered as significant. Now, whether it's a significant modification or not, it's a quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative, actually, it will not meet the test, so it will be a qualitative analysis. And therefore, frankly, sir, I do expect some diversity in how that qualitative analysis will take place. That was what I wanted to point out. As far as if the company is under Ind AS 18, now Ind AS 18 had a very different concept. In Ind AS 115, the concept is of transaction price. In Ind AS 18, the concept was of fair value. Now, I think if the fair value has changed, would I remeasure? Again, I think while Ind AS 18 is not as clear as Ind AS 115, I don't think I will go back and remeasure what has already been agreed. Was there a financing component at the time the fair value was being agreed with the customer? Answer is no. But again, please go to 109. 109 would require you to assess whether any financing component needs to be recognized once you have modified the credit period. So
if you really ask me, from 115 perspective and under Ind AS 18 perspective, very frankly, I will not like to modify that. I will not like to treat it as a financing part thereof. I will like to live the life a bit simpler way, very frankly. Whichever is a new contract, I may look at it from a different perspective. I may like to disclose it, that whatever my transactions have been there in the past, there, even if I have modified that contract, I have not brought in the concept of the finance actually into that. I want to disclose, I may disclose, that's a different matter. But I will definitely like to live the life a simpler way than modifying the contract and then trying to, you can say, rope in the concept of the financing element. In those cases, I don't think I'm likely to do that. I'll at least try for what suggested.
While this is a technical point, you're right. My sense is it may not really happen in a large, because I'm not so sure financing terms will change so much, but it's something we should just be careful. I don't think it will meet the test of significant modification in a large number, but 109 will nevertheless require me to document.
Significant modification will be that if the party says I'm unable to make you payment for 2 years or 3 years, then I may think of. But if the party says instead of 3 months, I will be willing to make you payment within next 6 months, instead of 3 months, 6 months or 9 months, I don't think I'm going to say that this is a significant modification of the contract. I personally feel that.
The other is when credit period is being extended, while you may say you're doing it to make your, to make your contract still attractive for the customer and to retain your customer, but please, the minute you extend the credit period, just like the moratorium example I took for loans, even here, be careful and see whether your ECL measurement needs to be evaluated. All said and done, while everybody is going through this, and you may have given this, extended the credit period across the board for customers, you will need to also look at their ability to, from a payment perspective, see whether any increased ECL is required. So I don't know whether we want to open it for Q&A, but there were 2 or 3 points I'll just quickly mention, and if you believe any one of them needs elaboration, otherwise we can open it for Q&A. One was on scan records, but I think if most of the SMPs are going to postpone, audit once the lockdown is lifted, I don't think the scan records will be so much of an issue in their case, but I'll leave that to you to see if you want to expand. The other small bit which I just wanted to finally mention is that if there are defaults, if you believe they are, because of the impact of COVID on the financial statements, if the company is no longer meeting the covenants, the loan covenants, then look at it whether it results in any current non-current classification of loan. Just be careful on the loan covenants, breach, and any related implication. I did mention that the discussion we're having will hold good for all estimates. Wherever there are estimates, please go back and check. And if I can just mention 2 here because of their pervasive impact. One is deferred tax asset. You may have recognized deferred tax asset, but now looking at the future projections, the recoverability of those deferred tax assets may be a challenge. So see whether the deferred tax asset can be carried forward. Similarly, I'm just trying to think of any other. Similarly, if you look at employee benefits, if you've got defined benefit plans and let's say the defined benefit plan had made investments in securities and those securities have the prices have gone down significantly, if there is a deficit, the company may need to now provide for that deficit, etc. So just be very careful wherever estimates are involved. And the last bit, sir, is on bill and hold. Maybe I'll leave that for the time being. But on the other three matters, anything you like to say, sir?
No, I think the points that you have brought out are absolutely fine, particularly with regard to the deferred tax asset. I think all membership should be very careful because deferred tax asset has to be reviewed every year, and for that matter, even deferred tax liability, particularly deferred tax asset, if it cannot be realized in that and under the COVID-19 conditions, I think it will be very difficult to realize some of the deferred tax assets. So you need to be absolutely cautious while you are dealing with the review of the deferred tax assets. So please be very clear whether it will be possible to realize these deferred tax assets, or it will. If the company is likely to make losses in the next year or in the next to next year, then these deferred tax assets will have to be reversed in any case. So we cannot continue to have the deferred tax assets when the company is likely to incur the losses in those circumstances. So that is the point that you have tried to make out, and I think it's absolutely valid. Whether you talk it from the India's point of view or you talk it from the AS point of view, from both the point of view, this is absolutely relevant. So the other things, the two or three things that I will like to make out from the auditor's perspective is, one is the management representation, if you ask me. You see, so far, so good. We have been all trying to be saying that the management has given us the representation and we are trying to rely upon that. Believe me, this year is 1 year when you must test the, you can say the management representation with a microscope. I'm using this particular word. Use the microscope. You cannot just be relaxed on that particular situation, whether it is with regarding to the debtors, or it is with regarding to the inventory, or it is regarding to the advances, or it is regarding to the impairment of the assets. Anything which the management represents to you, basically, that it is all good so far as they are concerned. I think as an auditor, I will have to really test it more than once, whether it is actually good or it is just being told to be good. Because all these years we have lived with those kind of management representations, which have ultimately proved to be the other way around. As I said, that beyond post-COVID-19, our signing of the accounts, our signed accounts are going to be looked at with a greater microscopic view than what it has been looked at earlier. Believe me, today if I don't find a CAM or a matter of emphasis in any of the financial statement or auditor's report, I am getting, I can say, you can say that I shudder to think of it, why it is happening. That an auditor feels that no emphasis of matter is to be given, or no CAM is to be given after COVID-19, or if the management does not disclose it adequately, what is the COVID-19 impact, I start feeling. So when you look at the management representation, if they say, no, our business will go as usual, it cannot go as usual. There is no way that it will go as usual under any circumstances. Any business is going to suffer. As I said, there are 3 or 4 businesses which may go as usual, but all other business, even in the case of the transmission companies, basically the DISCOMs, I can tell you the liquidity crunch is going to be there, because the collectibles are going to be a problem. Like Delhi government has already told the people that you may not make payments for the next 2 months, and the clusters are actually not making payments. So liquidity problems are going to be there also for that particular matter. So if somebody says that my business will go as it is, as usual, I think this is the biggest fallacy of the situation, if I have to be today. Yes, Archana.
I think so. Maybe we can see if there are any questions. Yes, sir. I'm just saying if there are any questions, maybe we can take those.
We can take any questions now, because I think we are hardly having another 10 minutes to go. We can ask any questions, because we can go on and on. There are a number of other issues also, but I think there is always a time to call, take a call and say that it's good enough now. And if you find at any point of time some other issues may be taken up, but if there are questions, please ask those questions.
Thank you so much, CA Amarjit sir and CA Archana Bhutani ma'am as well. Sir, it always is a treat to listen to you. और सर को याद होगा कि जब दिल्ली में हम एनुअल फंक्शन में मिले थे, सर को मैंने कहा था कि नागपुर के मेंबर्स आपका वेट कर रहे हैं एंड वंस आई टेक ओवर एज अ चेयरमैन, मेरी रिक्वेस्ट अभी से आपको है कि आपको आना है, बट यस बिकॉज ऑफ अनफॉर्चुनेट कोविड हम फिजिकली नहीं मिल पाए, लेकिन यस आई मस्ट से डेलिब्रेशन वाज वेरी
आपकी
इफेक्टिव।
अभी फरवरी तक है, आपकी टर्म अभी फरवरी तक है। कोविड-19 विल गो अवे टिल दैट टाइम, डोंट वरी।
तो मैं अपने वर्ड्स ऐड करते हुए सर, रिक्वेस्ट मेरी अभी पेंडिंग है कि यस हम मिलेंगे जरूर सर, लेकिन एक जरूर है कि अगर मैंने देखा कि द वे deliberations were going on, the way you both effectively dealt with the subject, very unique it was, I must say. कितने सारे वेबिनार्स हम देखे हैं, नागपुर ब्रांच अलॉन्ग विद अदर ब्रांचेस हमने ऑर्गेनाइज भी किया है, लेकिन द वे इट वाज डेलिब्रेटेड, द वे जैसे हम बोले कि ये काफी इफेक्टिव वे में जैसे आपका कॉन्वर्सेशन भी था, लेकिन कहीं ना कहीं हम मेंबर्स के मन की जो बातें हैं, कि जो क्वेरीज है, वो आप लोगों ने इतने इफेक्टिवली उसको रिजॉल्व कर दिया। एक यूनिक चीज मैंने सर देखा अमरजीत सर, कि जब आपका डेलिब्रेशन शुरू हुआ या जब आपके ये चल रहा था, आपके टॉक चल रहे थे, तो काफी सारे हैंड्स रेज हुए थे, लेकिन जैसे जैसे आप लोगों ने बातों ही बातों में वो सारी चीजें कवर करते चले, तो हैंड्स सर अपने आप ओवर डाउन हो गए, यानी द क्वेरीज दैट वर देयर इन द माइंड्स ऑफ द मेंबर्स वर गेटिंग रिजॉल्व ऑटोमेटिकली, क्योंकि आपको नब्ज पता है कि व्हाट एग्जैक्टली मेंबर्स विश टू हैव। तो सर कुछ क्वेरीज मेरे को लगता है कुछ हैंड्स रेज्ड है, आई विल आस्क देम, if it is possible, it can be resolved through you, sir.
Yeah, please.
Ayushi Kamlani ji is there. You have raised your hand, Ayushi ji. If you are able to listen to us, Ayushi ji, you need to unmute yourself and ask the query. Ayushi Kamlani. Ayushi, you are self-muted. You need to unmute yourself and grab the opportunity, as we are having see Amarjit sir himself. We can have your query resolved. Okay, again then Khagendra Kokardeji is there. Khagendra Kokardeji, you also have one query. You have raised your hand. If you are able to listen to me, it is requested to unmute yourself and raise your query. तो शायद सर वो अपने आप को अनम्यूट नहीं कर पा रहे, but yes.
But there was one issue that was left out because Archana touched upon that. That was regarding the fraud, basically.
Right, sir.
That is one of my favorite topics, if you ask me, under COVID-19.
Right.
I personally feel that lot many unscrupulous businessmen will like to take advantage of COVID-19 to cleanse their balance sheet. And there will be lot many frauds taking place. You can be rest assured about it. And there the auditor has to be exceptionally careful. Wherever these businessmen had been showing, I can give you one example. Wherever these businessmen had been showing some inventories for the purpose of DP alone, no, they will say that we have written off those inventories because these were not sellable because of COVID-19. That is one thing. Wherever there are going to be significant write-off of inventories or write-down of inventories, the auditor should get into as much detail as possible and invoke SA 240 as much as possible, and maybe 143.12 also may be taken care of. The other thing that one will, like, wherever there are too many creditors being written back or debtors being written off, wherever debtors are being written off saying that they are unable to make me the payments because of COVID-19, and they have said that they will not make me any payment. Those are all those debtors probably there. It could be one of the cases that these are all those debtors where the sales were actually affected in a manner that I don't want to comment upon in the earlier years, and those debtors remained unpaid. And if you have not even started any action against them, if these are material amounts, you would have gone to court against them. Why you have written them off straight away? If after initiating the court proceedings you have written them off when you found that there is no other alternative and the cost of getting into litigation will be far higher than actually writing of them off, it's fine. But if you have not even initiated any process and have written them off, I can tell you that COVID-19 may lead to a lot of fraudulent situations, and the auditor should be wary of it. That's the point I wanted to make out. And with this, probably we come. Yeah.
And sir, just to that, apart from inventory, even from provisioning, etc., be careful that they're not trying to make over provisions or unnecessarily just make, buffers for future and so on. So there will be, and it's very natural a tendency at times to do, okay, let me create this year, so mera result gaya hi gaya, so let me just create something more this year. But we need to be very careful it's not being abused.
Yeah. So with this, Kiritji, we come to the conclusion of this particular webinar.
Yes,
Thanks
sir.
to you a lot, and thanks to Amravati branch and Akola branch for the opportunity and bringing in your members into the program.
Yes,
I'm
just
really
allow me
grateful.
to have, yes, thank you so much, sir. Allow me to have 1 or 2 minutes only, sir, of your
Yeah.
valuable schedule. सर जैसे काफी सारी क्वेरीज आपने रिजॉल्व किया, कुछ यूनिक चीजें मेरे को अभी भी याद हैं दैट आर रियली गोइंग टू हेल्प अस अ लॉट. जैसे अर्चना मैम ने कहा कि जो रिपोर्टिंग है बिकॉज ऑफ दिस कोविड-19 फेज इज गोइंग टू वेरी बिकॉज ऑफ ज्योग्राफिकल फैक्टर्स एज वेल एज द सेक्टोरियल, जैसे इंडस्ट्री टू विच इट द सेक्टर टू विच इट बिलोंग्स, वो एक चीज काफी अच्छी बताई है. देन डिस्क्लेमर सो फार एज ट्रू एंड फेयर व्यू इज कंसर्न, जैसे अर्चना जी ने रेस किया, अमरजीत सर ने कहा नो इट इज नॉट परमिसिबल. तो ये सारी चीजें शायद हम इसको सिर्फ सोच पाते थे, लेकिन यस बिकॉज ऑफ योरसेल्व्स हमको ये अच्छा गाइडेंस मिला है एंड इट इज गोइंग टू give value addition to all the members who are attending. We really are fortunate for that.
Actually,
Sir,
Kirit, it was only in the afternoon that I decided let's make it interactive rather than I will keep on speaking and she will keep on speaking. There's not much of point. So make it interactive, and if at all any one of us wants to say something else than what the other one has said, let it be made a point of it.
So, because of that only जो मैंने yes very effective sir, because of that only जो करीब 15-16 जो hands raise हुए थे वो सब अपने आप लोअर होते चले गए, क्योंकि आपको पता है नफ्स का है कि आप लोगों को क्या चाहिए. सर सीए जितेंद्र सकलानी जी is with us, who is secretary of Nagpur branch. I am going to request Jiten ji to please propose formal vote of thanks for very effective deliberations. Jiten bhai, it's over to you.
यार आप में से कोई कर दो जो करना.
Yes, Jiten ji, it's over to you. Jiten Saglani ji. Okay, sir. Probably is not getting connected again, but yes, sincerely on behalf of Nagpur branch as well as Akola and Amravati branches as well, we really are fortunate to find you here with us, and your guidance and your effective deliberations are going to give the much needed value updations to our knowledge basis, that I must say. I sincerely thank Amarjit Chopra sir, CA Archana Bhutani ma'am, for being here, for deliberating, for guiding us, for gracing as well as blessing with your words of wisdom. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Stay safe. Stay safe, stay
so
healthy. Thank you. God bless.
And we also wish sincere thanks to the attendees as well, who are here with us, and because of them the webinar has become a successful one. Thank you one. Thank you all.